You've interviewed, from what we understand, over 5 to 10,000 different personalities.
People like Stephen Covey, he died after I spoke to him. Jack Welch, he died after I spoke to him. Ralph Baer, the guy who came up with video games, he invented the video games, right? He died after.
Can we get an ambulance on standby?
No.
I'm slightly worried about my own health
I'm
right
interviewing.
Now. You are a broadcast journalist extraordinaire, a moderator, a speaker, author, trainer, prominent radio personality. You've also been an amazing advocate for women empowerment.
We're still not well represented in politics. We're still not well represented in sports. We're still not well represented in business. I'm not going to ask you who is in your senior management team. I'm not going to ask you.
You're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Go is 90% women.
So I think it's brilliant that the government has mandated for public listed companies anyway to have ESG plans in place. At the end of the day, I hope that people don't look at it as like a checklist.
Isn't that half the problem? I mean, do you not think that a lot of people still today are ticking boxes?
Ooh, a good idea.
All right, guys, welcome to Marketing Mavericks, a light-hearted afternoon chat with a wide variety of unique individuals to see what makes them tick and how they aim to get ahead in the diverse world of marketing. I'm Pete de Kretser, CEO and founder of Go Communications. I've also got Anis, a colleague of mine who is an assistant brand manager, and we've got a very, very, very special guest in the studio today. It is none other than Miss Freda Liu. Mm-hmm. Now, Freda, if I go through your bio, it could take up another 45 minutes. You are a broadcast journalist extraordinaire. You're a moderator, a speaker, author, trainer, prominent radio personality, and of course have your own Spotify podcast.
Yep.
Now, what have I missed?
You've just covered. You've covered it all, basically. I do a bit of coaching as well,
right.
But you've covered it all. If you were to go in depth, it just goes to show how old I am.
I wouldn't say that at all.
See?
Yes.
And it doesn't matter. Age is good. Okay, moving on.
Young at heart. Yeah, good answer to the first question. Freda, we always ask guests that come in, for the very few that might be unaware, what's been keeping you busy and what have you been up to in recent times?
So in recent times, apart from traveling and having a good time, I've just started this show on sustainability called The Shift Asia. So that's a project that has started a year ago. I find that very fulfilling. I've also gone into a little bit of training and coaching and the usual emceeing and moderating with corporate events. So that's what's been keeping me busy. And I think, so I've quit full-time work. I think that helps in terms of thinking where my next life stage is going to be. But I love this. I love the work that I'm doing around sustainability. And I realize that my strength is sharing these stories around sustainability, whether it's ESG or in social impact companies. I find that that's where the passion lies for now.
No, fantastic. And we might touch on that a little bit later on. In terms
and a book last year.
And another one.
The seventh book last year. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, seeing as this is Marketing Mavericks, let's start with your broadcasting background. You've interviewed, from what we understand, over 5 to 10,000 different personalities. No doubt met some of the best minds in the world. From a marketing perspective and just your own pursuit, when you sit down beforehand with an interview much like this, how do you sort of identify what the sweet spot, the chili sauce, the type of questions that you're going to answer that's going to give audiences something different that they might otherwise expect?
Whew. Okay.
Loaded question, I realize.
Very, very. Okay, it's the usual thing, right? It's called Google. You research the person, and you give them a bit of breathing time to talk a little bit about what they want to talk about, right? And then you find in that a different angle, perhaps a different spin to things, or even in that conversation, right? They might just say something and you want to drill into that, right? So you do go in with sort of a headline in mind, like as you would writing a news release, right? You do go in with that headline in mind, but at the same time, in that conversation, they might veer into a different direction, and then of course the headline can change, right? But you do have a certain angle because sometimes there's so many aspects to it. So you want to just sort of delve into one area and then go deeper into it. So it really depends on what the flavor is, right? It could be something that's current, that's in the news, right? And it kind of connects with that person, and you might bring up that angle with that person. But I do go through with my guests as much as possible. When in the radio days and they come in, as they come in 30 minutes before, and we sort of run through it together, run through the questions together, so they kind of get the angle that I'm trying to work at as well. And my style is always to get them comfortable so that they can speak freely, right? I mean, they would be freaked out during an interview with this mic in their face. So I want to just to get them comfortable, because when they're comfortable, they're just going to talk. Like they feel like they're talking to a friend, right? Like pretty much like I'm talking to you, because you've made me so comfortable, and honest too.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
And just within that context, I mean, how much would you say with the research it can be engineered? You might have what we call, big Netflix movie, I think it's called The Scoop,
right?
Which I think you interviewed Prince Andrew as well, right? So
before The Scoop.
Great segue. How much of it can be contrived, engineered, be the scoop, as opposed to them, making them feel comfortable, and then kind of taking the dialogue in a certain way where you're digging and you actually find out more, and that gives you the advantage in terms of content and stuff like that moving forward.
Right. Okay. So what I would do, sometimes I'm so mindful, like for example, when radio, right, there's also a time frame. So how much can you get within that certain time frame? You have to think about that, especially in radio, but maybe with podcasts right now, we've got different people doing 2 to 3 hour podcasts and all that, right? But if you think in the radio context, and I had to think that way, people's attention span, probably within that, I would say, get them talking, and then there'll be 1 or 2 saucy questions, right? And then sort of like get them in when they're sort of relaxed, and then
hit them.
Right.
Very interesting. Anis, do you have a question on that?
That's where she's gonna hit me.
Anis is our trailblazer with the hard-hitting curveball questions.
I'm super curious because throughout your career, you've just, as Peter said, you've interviewed so many people. Yeah. So if you could bring someone back to life, who would you interview and
bring back to life? Okay, I haven't killed them all. Okay, I haven't killed. That said, right? Have you finished your question? Sorry. Yeah. So that said, a couple of people, the big names I've interviewed, have passed on. People like Stephen Covey, he died after I spoke to him. Jack Welch, he died after I spoke to him. Ralph Baer, the guy who came up with video games, he invented the video games, right? He died. But they were in their 80s when I spoke to them, so it wasn't totally my fault.
Can we get an ambulance on standby?
No,
I'm slightly worried about my health.
That's when I'm interviewing someone. Bring back to life. Okay, my interview, if I have to say a favorite interview, and it wasn't the interview, it was the fact after, was actually Nick Vujicic, right? How I got that scoop with Nick Vujicic, and it was that conversation that we had after, right? And where he just spoke to me, and he had his crew there, right? And when he had his crew there, we were just talking, and he prayed for me, right? And he recorded it, and then he had his own video, and I said, oh my God, he aired that bit where he spoke to me, right? But he was just a very warm person. I think that was it. I mean, everybody knows his story, right? But when just hearing him say it, repeating his story, he has an aura about him. So I think that was great in that sense. Who else has? Simon Sinek, I've interviewed. And so they were all sort of like online. So Nick, I got to meet in person. Who else was interesting? Oh, Aussie guy, Julian Assange. Yeah, this is all. See, before they get in trouble, they meet me first. They die.
They're in trouble. Right. Gosh. Well, we got a lot to look forward to. Freda, I mean, this being Marketing Mavericks, right? Yeah. And you've been around a long time. Yeah. Are you almost able to tell those that have had media training, those that have these sort of stock standard answers, or those which you mentioned earlier, your favorites, that speak quite naturally from the heart and all that sort of stuff? Can you immediately tell, and do you think that's got an impact on the audience?
Oh, for sure.
Moving forward.
For sure. You know, because I used to work in PR as well, right? Because I prepare the stock answers too.
Yes.
Anyway, but I always like having, so sometimes they'll come in, especially with radio, they've got their notes. I said, please, you should know your topic well enough, right? And I understand, like maybe I would tell them, said, look, for your own memory, maybe just write bullets, right? You look at the bullets as prompters and then speak naturally rather than looking in your notes, because some of them, I'm like, and then when they start reading your notes, I change the questions around just to, you know, like get them to wake up and all that. Because I said, people can hear that you're reading your answers, right? I mean, that's the extreme. But, you know, they've got their standard answers, and sometimes, and you don't feel the full value when they do that, right? And so when you say media training as well, they may have their stock answers, but you can teach them to have analogies. You can teach them to have a personal story attached to what their key message is. And so that can be prepared in that sense, right? So you can say, my product is fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. You know, when I use this product, this is what happened to me, my family, and that can be prepared, right? But you know that it'll be coming from their heart because it's a personal story, and you still get your key message across. But people always remember these stories.
I think that's a really good point. When we break it down to its embryonic form, it's storytelling. Everything we do, and whether you're sitting at a bar top or a mumuk stall or having a coffee, conversing that way bridges you closer together. Asking you the question, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of crisis and through BFM, companies that want to sort of set the record straight or spokespeople. Is there one that sticks out to you? I mean, you can maybe mention the industry or something like that, where you just thought, wow, that was handled so eloquently that I didn't expect that to happen. Or it was even a brand that was trying to get some awareness going, and you just thought, boy, I'd put something together expecting it to go in a certain direction, and they kicked it out of the ballpark. It was just fantastic.
Wow, to kick it out of the ballpark. I think I'm trying to think of there was a particular brand, and I don't know if this connects it this way. So there's this particular brand who used to work through a direct, and this was me coaching the person before that. So a direct selling brand.
So you're saying that's why they did it so well?
I think, you know, I believe so. So I'm trying to recall now where I think when the person sort of acknowledges that this has happened and then they quickly move on, you know what I mean? I think that's a great thing, not to hide the fact that that this didn't happen, but I can't remember one of late. But that story, this story where this particular product that used to sell something used to go through the direct selling model, and then the direct selling model went haywire. Now the parent company now works with this party, and they don't do it through the direct selling model anymore. They do it through retail, right? And then I said, look, people know this brand, and people have a very bad impression of it from the direct selling model. And he says, we don't. I said, no, you have to bring it up and say that we don't work through a direct selling model anymore. This is a new partnership. We're going through the retail model right now, but you have to address it, right? You can't say it didn't happen because people know the brand for that, right?
True.
So yeah, I think like I think people do have to admit it and not skirt around the issue, be upfront about it, and very quickly bridge. If you learn in PR, to bridge it onto what we're doing now is, right?
Fair. Okay. I mean, I guess we're sort of delving into the one-on-ones where a spokesperson faces the brand.
Yeah.
And you've been in marketing through many aspects, as you've mentioned earlier. Are there brands in the marketplace leaving a celebrity ambassador, a spokesperson that comes out? Is there a brand in the marketplace, local marketplace, that you think is doing it well in terms of getting out there, not necessarily through interviews or anything like that, but purely through their marketing uniqueness, their creativity, perhaps the platforms they're approaching? Are there brands out there that capture your attention?
I like APOM.
APOM?
Okay. I think they're quite cute. You know, they have started with in a piece in Malaysia. I think the company puts thought into laughing at ourselves, right? And I think like every Malaysian can look at it and just sort of like, okay, it's very Malaysian, and you can feel good about it and even laugh at ourselves. So I think that's a cute brand that has come about, and I just realized, I was walking in, I never realized that they had a physical store. They had a physical store, and you know, so I think that is kind of, whether they're making millions or not, I think it's a great Malaysian story. We have to be very proud of these Malaysian stories. The other one, which is Bila Bila Mart. I think they've also done a great job. They can do the co-founders, which is a woman, won the EY Woman of the Year award. So good for her. And she says, why do we have, when we have Korean convenience stores and Japanese convenience stores, why don't we have Malaysian convenience stores? So I think these kind of stories that are proudly Malaysian makes me very proud, right? That this is, I'm ready to export this to the world, right? So whether it's a spokesperson or just the brand, that is a difference. But I think ultimately people do want to see the faces behind the brand.
Sure.
Right? That still comes back at the end of the day. People still sort of like want to see the story behind the brand. AirAsia aside, one of the things they do feature their all-stars, right? So people will always think of Tony Fernandez, but I think he does feature the different leaders in the different entities. So I've got to give it to that. But people will just sort of like gravitate towards Tony Fernandez, but he gives platform for all his for his stars. So all stars, as he calls them. Yeah.
So you talk about spokespeople. Now, with what you're doing, you're a spokesperson for your own brand, doing many things. How do you, as a sole proprietor, entrepreneur, what are the marketing tactics when you sit down late at night or early in the morning, maybe over yoga, and sort of decide, listen, how am I going to get my personal brand out there,
right,
in terms of what I'm doing? What are your unique USPs, factors, techniques that you would use?
You know what? The marketing degree came in handy. I tell you, the 4 Ps, seriously, when you start thinking of yourself as a product, all right? And then so let's go through the 4 Ps, lesson 101. You think of your price, right? You think of your price, and you think of your price in different areas, right? How do I charge when I'm an MC? How do I charge when I'm a moderator? And then after that, if you want a piece of me, buy my book, right? So that you think about your product, right? In all the different aspects, right? So that's the product, the price. Then you think of how am I distributed, right? And the place in the 4 Ps. So my show is then featured on all your different social media platforms. It's also featured on Audio Plus and all that. So you think that's my distribution channel, right? Ultimately, I would like to come up with courses and that people can buy online. So that's where it's placed, right? So that I'm distributed, because I'm only one person and I need to be able to multiply myself in that sense, right? Price, place, promotion, and it's just being, I guess, working with the likes of Go Communications, whatever, but there's a certain amount of promotion that you need to do, whether again it's online or offline. You have to do this kind of promotion, and you as a product have always got to improve, right? And I always give this example, right? Every year, I'm sure you get the latest, whatever your phone is, every year you're looking up for the best phone, right? You as a person, you as a product always have to improve. You always have to have an extra edge, whether it's learning a new skill, whether it's what, because why will I want to invest in something or someone who is not moving with the times, who is not growing with the times and not being current and relevant? So that's how I look at the 4 Ps, and how do I think about myself, right? Where am I in the 4 Ps, right?
Obviously been very successful.
Always can improve, right? The product always can improve. You can always learn new things,
of
right?
Course.
Yeah.
Now you've written seven books. Freda told me off recently for getting this wrong.
Tell her. It's my fault. I didn't update my LinkedIn.
Can I tell you something?
What?
Anyone that writes 1 book is a major accomplishment in their life. To write 7 books is kind of almost bordering on crazy, out of this world.
Yes.
What the hell inspired you to go and want to do this?
Not a one-hit wonder.
No.
So the first book, I don't know if you're going to bring that out, but the first book was actually, someone said, write a book. And I'm like, why not, right? What's the worst that can happen? Right? You don't die. So the first book I wrote was because I started interviewing people over the BFM. I say it because it used to be behind here. And what happened was that a lot of Malaysian companies 10 years ago they will tell their story one time and then they don't understand the power of PR, where your story needs to be told repeatedly, and it has to be told repeatedly, and then it has hands, and it needs to continue. So it's like, and why was that? Was the Malaysian companies shy? We are Asians, right? So I think we've improved a lot. I think like a lot of companies right now are aware of the power of PR, of putting themselves behind the brand. So I think that has changed. The landscape has changed thanks to social media as well, right? So 10 years ago, the landscape is completely different. Then, what was the question?
What inspired?
Okay, that was the first.
Why the hell did you do it?
That was the first book, right?
Yes.
So then subsequently, okay, so what also, then it's just like I'll just talk about the books at most. One was a book that was commissioned for me to write. This was this guy called Ray, who started now it's called Post Tree
Legend.
Yeah,
of the industry.
legend. I think everybody knows him.
Yes,
so the
indeed.
daughters got together and we all wrote the book about him. One of the books I also am very passionate about was called Bursting Fixed Mindsets, and this was all the women that I interviewed. And this was based on 2016's census of, and I interviewed a lot of women, right? Women in business and all that. And why is it that I was speaking to the National Association of Women Entrepreneurs Malaysia, and at that time, the members, only about 10% contributed towards what was then GST, when we had to pay GST, which means their revenues was 500,000 and above. And I was like, why are there so few women who don't have big businesses, right? And I wanted to feature women who had businesses in excess of $1 million in revenue, at least $1 million revenue, and to understand what was different about their thinking, right? And I was like, okay, instead of talking about what's wrong, let's talk about the women who've done it successfully and how they thought differently. So I was just inspired.
Did you see a gap?
Yes.
Because of that? I mean, was that done for a particular purpose in the sense that, did you see a gap in the market that needed to be sort of recognized
Yes.
in terms of the local landscape? And
Yes.
Perhaps they needed that awareness level or...
Because the reason I wrote that book as well was because I bought another book written by another person in the US called $1 Million Woman, and she was saying, and I was like, wow, is this a global issue? And I was like, okay, so checking on the stats, it is a global issue. So looking into the Malaysian aspect, so and that inspired me to write that book. Then after the most recent book was a collaboration with 5 other women. I was like, okay, great, I'm not the only one writing it, I can handle it. We don't, I think the most memorable was the book that I wrote during the pandemic, because there was nowhere else to go. And and I was thinking, at that point in my life, milestone birthday, son was at home. Now if I die tomorrow, he doesn't know anything about mom, right? So it was just lessons I learned in my life. Every decade had lessons at different points in my life, and it was called Life's a Stage, right? Because life's a stage, and there are life stages that we go through, and my life is pretty much on a stage, right? So that was, and it was like, okay, let me write 1,000 words a day before I'm allowed to watch Netflix. So that was it, because otherwise you'd just be watching Netflix.
True that.
1,000 words. Because you have nowhere to go.
Yes.
There's nothing you can do.
Good time to do
right?
it.
Right? Yeah.
And I know Anis has got a burning question, but maybe just on the back on that, last one from me. You see more and more books that are coming out. Look, I think we're obviously learned enough to say that unless you are top government official or prime minister, books are not going to make you
rich.
The bucks that you might think. But having said that, do you think that it acts as a really good sort of marketing tool as we come back to? And you touched on this a little bit.
Yeah.
And should we sort of encourage more and more people, I guess, to tell their story?
Yes.
And to put it on.
When's your book coming out?
Far too young. But that should never be an excuse.
No, it's not about far too
young.
young.
I'm going to do something we've never done on the podcast. I'm going to reach back here.
What's about far? You have it in the book.
Oh, careful! I'm plugged in.
You did.
There you are. We do have a book, but that's Dad's book.
Dad's book,
which I would love to give to you. Have you got a copy of that?
No, I don't.
Okay, let's go for it.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
So thank you, and that should be the motto.
Okay.
But following in his footsteps is going to be very, very hard.
Okay, he's a legend.
Thank you for saying that.
Right, he's a legend.
Very kind.
And the son continues the legacy. No, but I think you should, right? I mean, it's also just, and there's so many stories around it, whether, you know, how times, there are many angles. We can sit down and workshop that, you know, but I think you should, if you've got a story, you feel that it needs to be shared and someone can learn from it. And I always look at it this way, right? It's not about selling the millions or whatever, but it's like, if it made an impact to one person's life, and I know, right, if someone would just be in touch with me and say, you know, I read this, it's very bold of you to talk about this, my personal life story, and I was like, okay, I'm glad it made an impact to one person, right? And I think that's that conversation, even if just one person watched this, I hope there's more than one, and it made an impact to your life,
Can we get the entire office on this?
Right? and if it got you thinking, if it got one person thinking differently, then I have made an impact to one person's life, right? And that's how you have to think.
And I kind of love that. And I think there is the misnomer of yesteryear where perhaps it was those that had been in a certain place or experienced that were the ones that could put their stories down on paper. I think we're seeing more and more now, young kids or youthful personalities, entrepreneurs that are writing books and telling their story at a younger age. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that, and why not, right?
Yeah, and we also have to understand the game, right? Understand the game as in, okay, it somehow works when it's written in the West and it's been listed as the New York Times bestseller. How do we change that? How do we change that narrative, right? Right now, you know, Michelle Yeoh has been doing this for the longest time. You know, she's won awards in this part of the world, but somehow only when it's the Oscars do we applaud her. Why is that the standard for quality? This is something that annoys me, right? But they've controlled that space for the longest time. So we've got to change that narrative out here in Asia as well. Story for another day.
Love that, love that. Vanessa, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I've heard that you look up to Arianna Huffington as one of the people that have really inspired you, and you've mentioned it was because throughout her career and her life journey, you mentioned that she showed you that she still has time, and you've really followed that sort of philosophy, maybe, and that really has inspired me too when you've mentioned that, because we're not getting any younger, and so I was wondering how, when you call yourself a learning enthusiast, when do you know that you need to go on to the next thing to learn something new, or is it just forever, like you're always curious? Okay,
be curious forever. You know, you hear stories of Alzheimer's and dementia, right? But be forever curious. I want to bring up a point that you said. So Arianna Huffington, if you don't know, started the Huffington Post at 55, right? So she started at 55. I still got time. So she started at 55. She sold her business in her 70s to start Thrive, right? So now she's, I think, close to 80 or whatever, and she's still busy at it, right? So so she started a business at 55, right? This is a woman, and so that's one thing. And I don't think age should ever be a factor. This is where we have to take that out of that picture, because you always can be relevant as long as you still have breath, right? And that whole learning thing, right? I consciously do this every year, where I sit down and say, okay, what's a skill I need? What's a new thing I need to learn, right? And it can be, it's got to be a bit mental. It can be also some physical aspect that you need to look at as well, in terms of getting more muscle. That's why you saw me at the gym, right? You know, so I need more muscles. I need more strength conditioning exercises. But then also mentally, what you want to do. So then the next course that I'm taking is understanding finance for non-finance, you know, for non-finance people. So just something that's a little bit different, so that your mind, you know, Duolingo, I'm on a language thingy now, right? Just 3 minutes a day, just do that, so that the mind is not just stagnant in one kind of thinking, right? And somehow you just see something, especially when you travel, you look at something and then after you think, how come this connects with that, right? Or even, and it doesn't have to be that. It could be a walk in the park and you say, I'm trying to find the connection between this, and it's two different things, but somehow you learn from other things as well. You learn a lot from nature, actually, but that's
Hi guys, a brief interlude during this fiery chat, just to bring your attention to an incredibly worthwhile cause in Hospis Malaysia, an institution that we work very closely with here at Go. You can find the contact information probably here below and the website, just to bring attention and awareness to a terrific organization and to see if you can help in any way you can. So thanks for listening. And you know what, I'm going to join that chorus, because this is going to probably sound like a bit of a shout out to Babas, the chili powder.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure if you know the story,
Yes.
but similarly, much like the Huffington Post, the founder, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to get this slightly incorrect, but didn't start the Babas company until he was in his late 40s, 50s as well.
Wow.
And from what we understand, whatever's recorded, one of the most profitable, successful companies in the country where demand
Right.
exceeds supply.
Right.
So they can't make enough chili powder for Malaysians to get
And
enough.
they
of it.
export. I know they export as well.
And they have started to export, but again, coming back to your foundation point, the company wasn't started until he was 50,
Yeah.
late 40s.
And-
An amazing story.
And you know what? That's the misconception as well. Actually, a lot of people don't start their business in 40s. It's just that we always hear of the young guns, right? And they get the publicity, but a lot of people actually start their business in their mid 40s,
Yeah.
right? So so this is that whole misconception as well as to when you can start business, and also when you start your business, right? Who are you benchmarking yourself against, right? You don't Mark Zuckerberg, what have you, Elon Musk can be aspirational and everything, but maybe you're just happy with an X amount of money and you're still successful.
Yes.
Read the book Company of One. That's a brilliant book as well, right? But other brands, Royal Selangor, I think what's amazing is fourth or fifth generation, right? And it stood the test of time. I think these are great Malaysian brands that have made it globally. Lingam Sauce. So, but yeah, these kind of brands that have made it, and I think the test is when you're known on a global scale. That is good. Yeah.
Right. Freda, let's switch gears to a subject that you're very familiar with. We talked about this at the top of the show. Sustainability. Current buzzwords in the market are ESG. We started with CSR years ago. Many clients we've had in the marketplace, they shorten that to CR. How do you see brands in the marketplace adopting this? Do you see it done well? Is there an authenticity behind it? No doubt there are aspects where it's government mandated in many ways. And how do we differentiate between that? No doubt the overall arching aspect of it is good in nature and well-intentioned. But are brands doing it the right way?
Okay.
The wrong way? I mean, what's your overall feeling on it?
Okay, so I think it's brilliant that the government has mandated for public listed companies anyway to have ESG plans in place. Obviously, it's it's more you're more in control when you're looking at the E aspect, okay? Because it's within your organization, you can manage it. But then what happens with these public listed companies? What they call, okay, I'm going to get a bit technical. When they get to scope 3 and they have to look at their suppliers, right? And that getting everybody on board, it is a good. I think it's important because at the end of the day, the thrust of what it's trying to do is for people to be aware of all aspects, right? So the E, the S, and the G. And we've heard examples, Sabah Dynamic, we all know, right? Where what happened, right? And they were board directors. So what happened there? And it affects the public's money, right? Your investors' money. So this sort of thing I'm glad with the listed companies, but also SMEs are probably struggling with it at the moment. They're struggling with the moment. How do they get started and all that? And they got to look at better, and it's good, right? Your governance has to come into play on how and governance at the end of the day is to ensure no corruption, no bribery that comes into play. I think the social aspect is going to be a bit of a challenge because it's about caring for the employees and all that, and what are you doing to impact the community that you're working on. And that's where what used to be known as CSR coming into play. So I think it's great. People they know that they have to come on board soon. For those companies that have already been exporting all this while, especially to Europe and America, they already know what needs to be done. At the end of the day, I hope that people don't look at it as like a checklist, and probably we have to do that for now.
Isn't that half the problem? I mean, do you not think that a lot of people still today are ticking boxes and seeing it as
okay?
And again, it can be a good thing to tick
Yes,
boxes.
yes.
But then, where is the genuine sincerity behind it? And again, longevity. You
Right.
might tick a box to sort of go through a particular motion that particular year? Do we know that it's going to have any sort of long-term future? Doesn't the whole ESG notion warrant some sort of heart, sincerity behind it?
You know
as
what?
opposed to just, again, it's like a tax form.
But if without that in place, right?
You've got nothing.
You've got nothing. It's even worse. Even if we can't do it authentically, at least that's in place.
But could they find ways around that at the same time, like you would a tax form?
I don't know. I don't know.
Who does know? What are we talking about? Moving on swiftly.
Well, probably listed companies, we're hoping that with that in place, you'll be very mindful. Without that, this is where, you find ways around it, right? Of course, people are people, right? But kind of leads to, I think, a question about what do you and leaders of that organization then have to sit down and look at what they represent. Where do they see a future here? Are we here for the long term, or are we here just to, play? Right? So I think it's important that this has come into place so that you actually take yourself seriously. What are we doing in terms of ESG? If that didn't come into place at all, they wouldn't even think about it. So at least better than nothing, right? Better than no checklist.
And let's talk about that just in terms of brand as well. I mean, something that, seeing as I'm looking at Dad in the cover of the book, something he used to say to me and the guys in the office was, the CSR back then was, again, a buzzword.
Yeah.
And what he would say is the best that do CSR, they have the notoriety and the longevity of what they're doing CSR or CR for. So, for example, you could mention X brand and you know what it stood for.
Right.
As opposed to brands these days that one minute they're helping the forests, the next minute they're helping,
Yes.
orphan children.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a scattergun approach, right?
Yeah.
Do we not think that longevity of what's going, when it comes to brand impact with an audience as well, not just ticking the box and doing right by internally your employees, but externally to the marketplace, when you're known for what you stand for, doesn't that make a larger impact with the audience as well?
Yes, I think like with companies, when you look at your social aspect, right, it'd be good for people to know you for what you stand for, right? And not like, okay, this year we're going to do this year we're going to do this year we're going to do this, right? And think about the community that you're serving. I believe that that's the case, right? This is where they need PR services, right? Be clear about what your company stands for. And if you don't have anything right now, maybe go back on the drawing board, be clear about what we stand for. Because, for example, I know for the longest time when I was working at BFM, it was about children, right? If we were to do anything, it was around children. And that was, and every, different aspects around children. For me, for me personally, it's about education, right? For children's education. And that's something that I stand for. And when I do something and I'm thinking, okay, does this connect, if something that's social about me, does it connect back to education? So I think companies, if they never had something, should go back to the drawing board, look at the social aspect, and take it seriously and do something. It could be like, this is something we want to do for 5 years and we'll revisit again after 5 years. But so to make an impact, because you're not going to make a change in just that one time mock check, back to the mock check, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah, no, really good point. Anis, did you have anything to add there?
You're an adjunct professor at UNITAR, and I think in one of your pages it mentions that you do touch on sustainability with them in your media and comms teaching.
Right.
Do they understand? I'm just wondering, when you're interacting with them, do they understand the importance of sustainability now, or?
Okay. All right.
It feels pretty new.
So I think I need to correct the LinkedIn, right? So far I haven't thought that was
good
what
question,
I
Anis.
was
And good research.
Okay, good research. No, so far I've been talking to the master students, and it's been online, so more on the communications aspect. So I do talk about sustainability very broadly, but I don't teach sustainability there. So let me correct that. But then under sustainability in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there are things around gender equality, there are things like that, right? So I mean, like we can share those things whatever they believe in, but I don't teach sustainability per se, but I do say maybe there's a particular cause that you want to work with and everything, so I haven't taught that. correct that on my LinkedIn.
No. But do you feel like younger people nowadays, they do understand how broad it is, that it's not just about the environment, for example, it's not just about climate change, it covers quite a lot.
Yes, I do see like a lot more impact companies coming in, started by young people, and they're things like Heidi Kwa, Refuge for the Refugees, right, 10 years ago, the plight of the refugees. So all these different people, I think the younger folks are a little bit more in touch with these things, which is great. I don't think they even look at it as, these are my 17 sustainable goals. It's just causes that they believe in, and it happens to fit into one of those things. Ifuji, right, is education for the refugees, right? So these things seem to come into the fore right now, not 10, 15 years ago, right? And I think like even that's why I really enjoyed the time at BFM, because we covered these things that were not talked about or given the airtime before. Until we came out, and people started being more aware of these issues at hand, right? When we bring them up.
Yeah, amazing. And you've been a force for change, I think, in many ways in that particular arena. And also, you've been a force for change. I don't think it's any secret, as I gauge at my notes here. You've also been an amazing advocate for women empowerment. I mean, I've got here that again, there's a number of councils, member of the National Association of Women Entrepreneurs Malaysia. Among other great institutions. I guess, loaded question and fairly generic. Maybe you can help me, Yanis.
Okay.
How do you think that, the change in the role of women in the workplace, be it through leadership, increase in entrepreneurs, where are we now in Malaysia, do you think? And do you think we're getting to the precipice of real change? And,
Very far from it, unfortunately.
Okay, that's an interesting answer.
Okay, I'll tell you where we're succeeding. I think in the workplace, especially MNCs, right? This has been 20, 30 years. I mean, me working at IBM, even back then, right? Working from home, when I managed to get a regional job because I wanted to work from home. So back then, that was something. But so MNCs, I think they have more control. The larger corporations also take this into, we've got longer maternity leave. So we've got all these things going on, right? We're still not well represented in politics. We're still not well represented in boards. We're still not well represented in sports. We're still not well represented in business, right? So the numbers have not gone up. So like recently I tied up with Lead Benches. We came up with an accelerator program just for women, right? So that, so I was just asking Bikesh, and I was like, actually, when you have these accelerators, do you get at least 30% of women participating? It's like, actually, when I spoke to him last year, he had the cohort, he said, actually, we do have now, but I guess we're not conscious about it, right? Maybe we need to enlarge the pool so that we get that 30%. So anyway, this year he said, let's just do an accelerator for women, right? So the idea behind it so that we get more women involved in this, because that makes a difference as well. So we see pockets of this changing. And I think it is making an impact, but maybe we'll talk to me in 10 years' time to see if that has changed. But again, right, MNCs, they probably get it right. Larger corporations, they get it right. Government is moving right. Policies are moving the right place. Like I said, we're still not well, government itself, we don't have enough.
But is on that notion, I mean, disclaimer, Go is 90% women. And all power to God bless.
Right.
What are the barriers? Is it policy? Is it institution? Is it legacy? What is stopping fundamental change in that area? Because there's no doubt, certainly in Go, and I'm not trying to plug Go, but maybe I am.
Yeah.
Look in other businesses, and when I go out, there's such talented females in the country, in the workforce.
Yes.
What is the barrier? I mean, I know it sounds like a silly question. But what do you think the fundamental barriers are?
Okay, there are some unconscious bias, okay?
Right.
I'm not going to ask you who is in your senior management team. I'm not going to ask you.
You're more than welcome to.
Okay.
And I would say it's fairly balanced. I would say it's predominantly women from a shareholder structure.
All right.
Fairly balanced.
Okay, so you're one of the few, right? Okay, now that's one aspect. So great. And I think that's moving the right direction. Even the organization that I used to work for, we also had a lot of women as well. The other barrier is also self-imposed barrier. Okay, so women also put these barriers on themselves, right? They have this thing called, mostly more with women, men also have it, imposter syndrome, that they can't fit the role. We have to change what are the gender roles. Why is it that the woman has to give up the career or take a back seat when they have children? In Scandinavia, they have 18 months parental leave, of which 6 months it's up to I think it's up to them, whether it's the men and the women. Taking parental leave, the only thing that a man can't do is breastfeed. Yeah. Other than that, you can do everything. So that has to fundamentally change when you look at raising the family beyond the responsibility of just a woman, right? So again, we can say all these things. Now, is the woman willing to change that perception of themselves, right? I have no issue with that. So you also have to change your mind. Why is it that unconsciously are we doing this and we're putting barriers ourselves? The other thing that I want to bring up as well is this whole notion of sponsorship. So women have no issues finding mentors, but they have an issue finding sponsors. And some organizations have sponsorship in place, larger organizations where they say, Peter, I want this role, right? I want this role. How do I work towards getting this role? And then you as the sponsor will say, okay, you need to do this course, you need to do this, and you've got to, and then you'll be able to qualify. And there is an opening right now, so you've got to also sound out that you're looking for that role. So don't expect to be noticed. This is a concept called the good girl syndrome. The good girl syndrome is that when you were in school and you submitted your homework, teacher would say A+, Anis, and you say, oh, the teacher recognized me. In the workplace, if you don't speak up for yourself and say that you're good, don't expect your boss to, right? It's just not on his priority, right? Unless you tell them, hey, look what I've done for you. Oh yeah, right? So the woman also has to take the lead in showcasing themselves, yeah.
And I think that's fair. But, and you know, it's, again, do you not think it's just when it comes to companies, a two-way street? Is there not an obligation on a particular company, male, female, or indifferent, to let their, whether it's superior, colleague, in 6 months, this is where you should be, this is where I want to be? Is that gender bias if both people know, based on performance, where they want to go?
So you've got to, I mean, so this is like if I'm doing my review with you, right? So I'm, of course, then I have to say, I want this role, and I'll tell you what happens also with unconscious bias. Like two people could be having a conversation, right? You and I can have a conversation. And we're saying, you know, who would be really, Maria will be very good for this role. And then we'll be talking amongst ourselves, and I say, yeah, but Maria just had a baby. I don't think she'll be interested. Right? So we really, in our kindness of our heart, have put our own unconscious bias on that person. So in that process, I guess when you're doing the review, the woman also has to say, this is where we want to go. I'll tell you this, I'm actually talking to someone at the moment who's being coached. And the boss says, I think you can be a partner. And she says, I don't want to be a partner.
So again, comes back to my point, right?
Right.
If you get both sides,
at
least voicing where they want or don't want to be.
Go. Yeah.
At least you're getting an equilibrium of thought.
Yes. So then this is where the woman has to have to stop and say, why don't I want this role?
Right.
Right?
Or why do I want it?
Yeah. Right? So you can also bring it up, right? So you have to be very vocal about it and not just be, and I get it, right? So, and I think that's why, like, you have to go back and say, is it because I want to take a back seat for raising my child? And I did take a back seat in my career because I was in the first 6 years of my son's life, right? My KPI and my goals were keep job.
Yeah, I understand.
Right? And so that, you know, and there are some people who said, no, someone will do this and I want to move up my career, but I wasn't willing to. So this is, I have no regrets, but also be aware that this is what's going to happen. So until we change that storyline, right? And there's also cultural, in Malaysia, there's cultural where expectations on one gender to be at home, right?
And generational, I would
say. And generational as well.
We're having to combat.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So until you're self-aware and you're willing to say, I'm going to break that mold and do things differently.
Yeah, very fair statements. Okay, well, I know time is precious for you, Freda.
And to you.
Well,
we can be here forever. 3 hours. Let's go for it.
We have to write the 8th book after this. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's fantastic. I'm just so amazed by that, by the way. We talk about, whether it's gender equality, women empowerment. Let's talk about the youth in general, because that's kind of a big talking point, right? For a lot of, dare I say it, employers, even the youth themselves, right? There seems to be a bit of a backlash, some kind of for lack of a better word, a lack of meeting of minds. Where do you see, and a lot of people complaining about talent drain, where do you see the youth in Malaysia today in terms of our business across, and how do you think we can help them or they can help us?
Well, if they don't cross the border to earn that kind of money, that's one we have a lot of talent leaving the country.
Is in
right?
brain drain.
Okay, the brain drain. Okay, so that's one, right? But the other thing with youth, I don't like to do this broad sweep with youth, because when I'm just talking about the youth that I work with, depending on their background as well, right? Depending on their background as well, if they've had a bit of a challenge, and you see, that some two individuals, same age, but they've gone through different challenges, and you see how they operate are very different. So I find that what works though is trust, right? What works at the end of the day is trust. I don't think it's an age thing, right? If I trust you, I would want to work with you. I want to work for an organization that says, I'm just giving an example, save trees, right? Because that's what I believe in. And this is the thing, right? But then if you then turn around and say, it's okay, we can cut a couple of trees, it's all right. I'm doing this very simply, right? Yep. Then I don't trust you anymore. So I think the new generation are more concerned about that, right? More concerned about, do I want to associate my name with you? Do I trust you? And it was probably the same for me as well, right? But at the same time, it comes from a different time, because I had to work, right? I came out here, I had to rent my own house, I had to buy my own car, I had to do these things, so we put up with a lot more. I'm looking at my son, right, who will come back and know that there's a roof over the head. Maybe his requirements are different, right? And so that's why I don't want him to come back so soon. I want him to live on his own and understand what it's like, right? The responsibility.
Sure.
But and I'm just saying, also a small group of people. There might be some people who come out and then they have to do certain things because it's a matter of survival. But at the end of the day, for the long term, if I don't trust you, I don't think I want to work with you. So you build that trust, right? So someone is saying that what's going to be the future for any clients in as well. If you continue to build that trust with your customers, they will come back to you, right? It's just that when you say certain things and you don't mean it, human nature, and it's beyond youth, even someone my age, if I don't trust you, I will leave you.
Yeah, no, really good point.
Right?
Before we let you go, Freda, and you've been fantastic. Anis, have you got any other questions you'd like to ask Freda before she leaves?
More on advice, maybe. I think you've been in the industry for a number of years. Yeah. Vast experience. Is my safe word. So what would you, I think, for people who are a bit afraid of getting out of their comfort zone, what advice would you give them? Because you're more of a learner.
Okay. Get out. Very good question. So, this is what I do every year. This is the Eisenhower decision matrix. Okay. Urgent, important, not urgent. Every year, look at your life, from physical, finance, to mental, to relationships. What is important, not urgent, that I need to do, right? So it's my health, right? I'm thinking 10 years from now, I will need my muscles, right? I need my muscles now, but 10 years, if I don't start now, right, the impact will be seen 5 years, 10 years. It's important, not urgent, I gotta do it now. Relationship with my son, right? What do I have to do to build a relationship with my son? I call him every Sunday. He doesn't like talking to me, but I call him every Sunday because it's a relationship that I want to continue to have, right? And I say, video, I need to see your face, okay? So this is important, not urgent, because in 10 years' time, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. Personally, what do you think is important? I want to earn X amount of money, okay? This is important. Not why, because one day I want to buy a house. I want to, okay, what do I have to do now that's important, not urgent? And list the things that you need to do, right? And then break it down to small goals. And then you'll find that, okay, I have to pick up this course. I have to learn this skill. I have to. So when you have that important, not urgent list, it gives you a vision to get out of that comfort zone, right? It's just like, okay, I got to learn this, right? And so you take that, oh, I got to learn now. Just start looking at where 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what's important, not urgent, that I need to do, so that one day it'll never be urgent, like your health, right? Hopefully, right? But I mean, you work towards that, right? So that's my advice. What's important, not urgent.
Probably a lovely place to. I mean, that's almost gospel, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we can follow that. Freda Liu, you are just an absolute ball of energy, a lovely lady. Thank you so much for coming in and having a chat with us.
Such a pleasure.
And listen, we can't wait to see what's next. But on behalf of all the guys from Go, thanks again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Anis.
All right.